just taking a quick look at this Bluetti AC70. So this is one of several new models from Bluetti. And yes, we will talk about the other ones in some future videos, but just to kind of go down here, let's do a kind of a quick overview of this video before we get into all the little details and all the little things that you might want to know, especially if you plan on getting one of the external batteries and, external, not expansion. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about kind of the pros and cons with a setup like that, and just, this power station in general in comparison to, well, specifically in comparison to some of the other Bluetti models. I think it's kind of quite interesting really to see. So, let's just talk about the specs here real quick though. Basically, we get 768 watt hours. So this is on the smaller end of the mid-size class. And then we do get a 1,000 watt AC inverter, and they do like to advertise this 2,000 watt. That's the power lifting. That's with the voltage dropping. We'll talk about that. I wouldn't recommend using that really. And then we do get a UPS feature as well. UPS, 20 milliseconds, so it should work. It's not something I, guarantee it's going to work, but it should work. And then obviously the 3,000 cycles because of LFP batteries, right? Now, what's interesting is that actually I was quite surprised by this. In fact, 500 watt solar charging on this thing. So yeah, you can use it with the B80, the B230, B300. You're probably going to want to use it with the B80, right? Because that's the smallest, most portable one. The one that kind of matches up with the size of this unit actually quite well. But the one thing that you got to note is that, this is different than an expansion battery. So, external battery, you have this connector here is the one you're going to need for the AC70, aviation to XT60. And then basically you can charge the AC70 with that battery. There's no communication between the two, right? You can't actually, like if you want to charge the AC70 from the wall, it's not going to charge the B80. It's not going to do anything back and forth, really. It's just, it's an external battery that you can then just, feed some extra power into the battery in the AC70. You can charge it back up with this battery, but there's no there's no two-way communication. There's nothing else. But it is nice that it has ports that you can use, right? I mean, there's a 100 watt USB-C, there's the 12 volt, and you can solar charge it up to 200 watts, right? It's not a true expansion battery like some of the other brands have, but you can do a lot more with this. Like the other brands, they like to kind of limit, and in fact, a lot of times their expansion batteries, you can't really do anything with them, right? With this B80 specifically, you can use it out in the weather as well. Like if you want to take power with you somewhere you plan on getting wet, you can do that. This is IP65 rated. It's all sealed up. All right, so that's enough about the batteries and all that stuff. Let's talk about this unit, AC70. And one thing that's really interesting here is that right on this listing, they actually provide this chart, this comparison, direct comparison to the EB70. So their own model, their older model, you know what I mean? So this is interesting because a lot of companies will kind of provide a comparison to a competitor, right? They're actually basically saying here that this new AC70 just blows the EB70S out of the water, right? And so why is this? Well, it's probably because a lot of you that are watching this video, you probably have an EB70S or an EB55, right? So they want you to upgrade, they want you to upgrade. And yes, basically this AC70 gets all of the newest, latest tech that these power stations have. So, and it's still small, it's still portable. And so charging, from the wall is quite fast, 850 watts. So that's more than a 1C charge rate, right? So, but they do say, at the end of the day, it's still going to take 1.5 hours because basically, it'll charge it 80% really fast, but then the other 20% is going to take a while. They do that to protect the battery. And then for the solar here, this is what I was really kind of surprised by. 500 watts, yes. I mean, that's actually really good for this size battery for solar. And they are using an XT60. So, Bluetti's, they've kind of been going back and forth with this, right? Between the XT60 and the 7909. Obviously, the XT60 is much preferred. And the thing is, it can handle more amps, but unfortunately, they've still limited it to 10 amps. So it's basically the same specs as the AC180, but XT60. So, you know, is it better? I think it is better, right? I'd still rather have XT60, and I'd still rather have 500 watts of solar in a small battery like this. And just to touch briefly on this 2000 watt powerlifting mode, it's a 1000 watt inverter. That's just, you know, if you want to use this thing, use the inverter on this thing, you want to power stuff, just ideally try to find appliances that are around 1000 watts, like 900, 1000 watts at the most. And then you won't have to worry about, is it going to work? You know, is it going to not work? You know, as I mentioned here, it's this 2000 watt rating is purely for resistive loads. But the thing is, then they show this image here, you know, they show this refrigerator, 800 watt. That's not a resistive load. That's a compressor, right? This one here, the blender, 400 watt blender, that's a motor, right? You're not going to want to use it with that either. Even this kettle and this high-end coffee maker, you know, they probably have a pretty complex control board circuit, you know, controlling it. So you don't want to have the voltage drop on a device like that either, right? I mean, really the only thing that you would want to use this feature for, this powerlifting feature, is like a hairdryer. All right, now let's just talk about the design here real quick. So this is interesting. Bluetti, as I mentioned, is coming out with a whole bunch of models here at the same time, and they all pretty much look the same. So that could be good or bad. You know, basically the thing I would say is I do like that they've continued to use these rounded corners. This kind of like rounded cube design that they came out with way back when, the AC50S, I think, was the first one. And then the AC200 series, right? The only thing I would say that I'm a little bit disappointed with is they're making all these new models, it's pretty much just all black. So the design is there, but the whole unit is black. It's just monotone. It's, you know, nothing special to look at. And then the other thing is that we actually get is an updated screen. So at first blush, you know, you look at this and you say, well, it looks pretty much the same, but actually it is pretty much the same, but they just made everything larger. You know, the font for the numbers, all of the numbers, in fact, it's just larger, and that's the same for the circle, you know, the bars that kind of give you a visual representation of how much power you got left. That's bigger as well. And then the other thing that they did add to this screen is look at all these icons that they have available to show. Now, obviously, when this thing's on, you know, they're not, all these icons aren't going to be lit up. This is just, you know, the possible ones that could light up, right? Now, what's interesting about this is you might say, well, this is a pretty basic unit, right? I mean, this is on the lower end of Bluetti's power station lineup. It doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have a huge amount of features. So you might say, well, that's kind of interesting. And the reason is because they're using the same screen on the upcoming AC200L. Okay, so this is the updated, refreshed version of like the AC200 Max. Okay. And one thing that you might want to note if you've been looking at those products from Bluetti, those larger ones, and you've kind of been hesitant about buying them because you notice that they still use a power brick. It's a massive power brick, in fact. Guess what? The AC200L, it's got big time specs, big time charging specs, like 45-minute charge from the wall, okay? No power brick. So yeah, you might want to take a look at that. And of course, you know, there will be a video on that one as well. And then for the USB, you know, we do get two 100 watt USB-Cs. They're not bi-directional, but still, that's, you know, nice to have. And then we do get two standard, these aren't quick charges. These are just standard 12 watt, you know, that's 2.4 volts. It's just a standard USB-A. But still, I like to see, at this point, I'll just be happy that they include USB-A. You know, everybody's going to USB-C. I still have a lot of stuff that uses USB-A. I'm sure you do too, right? So it's just nice, give us both. And then lastly, this little thing that just kind of, I don't know what's going on here. The logo, it just says Bluetti now. What happened to their actual logo, right? I mean, it's like, remember it was like some kind of cool little triangle thing, something like this. I don't know what it was, something like that, right? So what happened to that? Now it just says Bluetti. I don't know. So, and then the handle design on this thing is actually quite similar to those new EcoFlow River 2 models, right? Where it's a fixed handle, it's in the back, but you know, the thing is with this model, it doesn't protrude out the back. It doesn't, the handle itself doesn't actually stick out like those River 2 models do, right? So this is interesting. You know, we get the flat top, we get a fixed handle, which I really like. You know, it just feels better in your hand than a folding handle. And it doesn't take up extra space, right? It doesn't protrude out the back, as I mentioned. And then lastly, you know, this model does have the Bluetti app as well. So, you know, if you want app control, it has that. But yeah, I mean, that's the overview of this thing, right? I mean, it's kind of an appealing, it's actually quite an appealing product for such a small, compact little unit, you know, that you can use for road trips, you know, off grid, power outages, and just, you know, I would always recommend buying some solar panels. And you can pretty much use any solar panels with this thing, right? And then this 1,000-watt inverter, you know, you're going to be able to do whatever you really want to do, right? If you want to cook some food, heat up some food, get a hot plate that's 1,000 watts or less. And if, you know, if you already have one that's 1,200 watts, that's just a basic, simple hot plate. You just turn it on. Then you could use that powerlifting mode, right? You'd be able to still power that with that. Or a toaster, maybe even toaster oven, even maybe a toaster oven, right? Just anything that just has a simple switch, you know, that's over 1,000 watts, you could do that with that powerlifting mode. Otherwise, I would just say, you know, try to stick to 1,000 watts or less. It's just better. But still, you know, basically, at the end of the day, just, you know, if you have the right appliances, you're going to be able to heat stuff, cook food, use a hairdryer, anything that you would really want to do with this unit, right? And then you still have this 22-pound, lightweight, compact unit with all the features that you want, right? I mean, like I said, they even compare this to their EB70S model, right? Their older model, and just basically say, this thing's way better, right? This thing's way better. So, you know, it's something to take a look at, something to consider. And hopefully just found this overview helpful or interesting. And yeah, thanks for watching.